On a freezing November night in 1981, the calm waters off California's Catalina Island hid a darkness deeper than anyone could imagine. Somewhere between the whispers of the wind and the lapping of the tide, Hollywood's brightest star vanished. Natalie Wood, radiant, adored, and larger than life, was gone. When dawn broke, the sea offered its grim confession. Floating gently amid the black water was Natalie's body, still wrapped in her thin nightgown and a crimson jacket, a shade so vivid it looked like blood against the pale surf. The woman who once danced across silver screens now lay still beneath a sky she'd never see again. They said it was an accident. They said she slipped, hit her head, and fell while trying to secure a small rubber dinghy. But the bruises, the scratches, and her lifelong, paralyzing fear of water all whispered otherwise. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. For decades, the world clung to that night, November 28, 1981, trying to separate truth from tragedy. Natalie Wood's story wasn't just one of a life lost too soon. It was a riddle wrapped in silence, jealousy, and regret, buried beneath Hollywood's glittering surface. Her husband, the actor Robert Wagner, claimed he had no answers. But witnesses, investigators, and even Natalie's own sister would spend years wondering. Did he know more than he ever admitted? Now, more than 4 decades later, as Wagner neared the end of his life, the truth began to stir once more, quiet, trembling, and heavy with secrets. His voice, aged and fragile, trembled in a recorded interview. That night, there are many things I wish I could change. Was it remorse or confession? No one could say for sure, but one thing was certain. The glittering romance that once captivated the world had curdled into one of Hollywood's darkest mysteries. Natalie Wood, a woman terrified of the ocean, had drowned in it, and the man who loved her most was the last to see her alive. The night of November 28, 1981 was supposed to be calm. Natalie and Robert had invited friends aboard their yacht, the Splendor. Among them, Natalie's Brainstorm co-star Christopher Walken and the ship's captain, Dennis DeVerne. It was meant to be a Thanksgiving getaway, laughter, drinks, the ocean breeze. But as night descended, laughter turned to tension. The wine flowed freely and the mood shifted from celebration to unease. Inside the cramped cabin, the air thickened with alcohol and jealousy. Robert's eyes lingered too long on Natalie and Walken, whispering, laughing, close. Old insecurities began to resurface. Captain DeVerne would later recall that night vividly. He heard shouting, a glass breaking, and then Wagner's voice, sharp, angry, echoing through the cabin. "Get off my damn boat!" Moments later, Natalie was gone. Sometime after midnight, the waves carried away the only trace of Natalie Wood. She vanished into the cold, leaving behind her robe, slippers, and a silence that chilled everyone aboard. When the search began hours later, the scene was chilling. A mile from the Splendor, Natalie's body floated face down, her eyes closed as if in sleep. Nearby, the yacht's dinghy drifted toward shore, untouched, its engine off, oars still tied, and key still in the ignition. To the world, the picture didn't make sense. Natalie feared the water all her life. As a child, she nearly drowned during a film shoot and never recovered from the trauma. Why would she, on a cold, drunken night, step alone into the dark ocean? The autopsy revealed more unsettling details. A blood alcohol level of 0.14%. Bruises on her arms, wrists, and face. Scratches along her neck. All injuries suffered before she entered the water. An accident? Or something darker? To see her, prevent attempts that could have saved her life. And why, in a story so carefully narrated by Hollywood's golden couple, did such a glaring omission exist? Davern's recollections added a human element to the tragedy, a window into the fear, uncertainty, and moral paralysis that unfolded that night. He had been caught between duty and authority, between obedience to the man he respected and the instinct to save a life. Every second that passed in silence became a weight that would never leave him. And for Natalie, every moment alone on the cold ocean was an unbearable ordeal, a fight against the dark that claimed her with relentless inevitability. In the quiet of the early morning, when the first light of dawn barely touched the horizon, the splendor floated silently. The ocean, indifferent to fame and fortune, held its secret tightly. Natalie Wood's absence was no longer a question of argument or ego. It was a question of survival, of loss, of a human life extinguished too soon. The chilling reality of those 4 hours would linger for decades, shaping every account, every investigation, and every suspicion surrounding Robert Wagner and the last night of Natalie Wood. The investigation that followed Natalie Wood's death in 1981 was swift, almost unnervingly so. Within days, the narrative was neatly packaged. A tragic accident on a cold November night, the drowning of a beloved Hollywood star. Officially, it was over. But beneath the polished veneer of reports and headlines, whispers persisted, subtle, uneasy murmurs that something darker had occurred aboard the Splendor. Friends, colleagues, and even casual observers sensed discrepancies. Small details didn't add up. The bruises on her body, the scratches on her arms and neck, the cold indifference of the night, and the odd behavior of those who had been closest to her. These inconsistencies refused to fade, like shadows lingering at the edges of a well-lit room. For decades, the case remained dormant, filed under tragic accidents, occasionally surfacing in tabloids, in gossip columns, and in whispered conversations among Hollywood insiders. People asked quietly, could it really have been an accident? Was the story we were told, the story the authorities told, complete, or had something more sinister been smoothed over in the haste of conclusion? Then, 30 years later, in 2011, the case was reopened. Captain Dennis Davern, who had been one of the key witnesses that night, came forward with a confession that stunned investigators and the public alike. He admitted that his original testimony had been incomplete, even misleading. Fear had kept him silent for decades. Fear of authority, fear of retribution, fear of the man he respected yet feared, Robert Wagner. Davern's recantation painted a much darker picture than the official reports had allowed. Wagner, he suggested, had not been the grief-stricken husband depicted in the media. He had been a man capable of suppressing, manipulating, and controlling the narrative of the night. He had prevented immediate searches, blocked the use of the yacht's searchlights, delayed the call to the Coast Guard, all actions that, Davern revealed, spoke less of shock and more of deliberate concealment. The words he claimed Wagner uttered, "Leave her there, let her learn a lesson," echoed through the halls of justice and the minds of those who had followed the case for decades, chilling and unresolved. In the wake of this revelation, the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office revisited the autopsy findings and the circumstances of Natalie's death. In a significant and rare move, the coroner amended the cause of death from accidental drowning to drowning and other undetermined factors. The new phrasing, clinical in tone yet loaded with implication, transformed Natalie's story from a closed case into a haunting question mark. Robert Wagner, now decades older and increasingly reclusive, was officially named a person of interest. The label alone sent ripples through Hollywood and the public consciousness. For the first time, the golden image of the charming leading man who had once captured hearts on screen was shattered by suspicion. Yet, even with the weight of scrutiny and the unrelenting attention of law enforcement, tangible evidence remained elusive. No confession came from Wagner, no smoking gun, no definitive proof linked him directly to the final moments of Natalie's life. The ocean had claimed more than Natalie. It seemed to have swallowed the truth as well, leaving only fragments floating in its cold, indifferent depths. As investigators pored over decades of testimony, media reports, and witness statements, tension mounted. Friends described Wagner's behavior around Natalie's death as strange and unsettling. Some claimed grief consumed him. Others saw a calculating man shaping the story to protect his image while hiding crucial truths. Witnesses recounted ominous details, delayed alarms, struggling voices swallowed by the sea, and Wagner's own inconsistent recollections. By the 2000s, scrutiny stripped away his public charm, revealing a shadowed figure beneath. Yet, even after intense investigation and the coroner's revised ruling, closure remained out of reach. Questions linger. Did Natalie fall, or was she pushed? Did Wagner act out of malice, negligence, or human error? Or was the truth far more tangled, a mix of fear, jealousy, love, and accident? In the silent expanse where the splendor once floated, the mystery endures, a chilling reminder that sometimes, even fame cannot shield the truths lost to time in the depths of human complexity.
Two people aboard a nearby yacht later came forward with a chilling account. They claimed to have heard desperate screams slicing through the night. A woman's voice, raw with fear, calling out repeatedly, "Help me! Somebody, please help me!" The cries echoed across the dark waters for nearly 15 harrowing minutes, carried by the cold November wind. And then, unexpectedly, a man's calm, deep voice responded, almost eerily indifferent, "Okay, honey, we'll get you." But no footsteps followed. No engine roared to life. No one appeared, just silence. Only the whispering waves and the vast, indifferent sea remained. Years later, one of these witnesses, Marilyn Wayne, revealed the sinister aftermath of speaking out. A note had been slipped into her mailbox, typed with a stark, chilling warning: "If you value your life, keep quiet about what you know." The sender was never identified, leaving Marilyn and those who believed her with the terrifying sense that someone powerful, or someone who had been there that night, wanted the truth buried. Through it all, Natalie's younger sister, Lana Wood, never wavered. For decades, she spoke with unwavering conviction, her words sharp and unrelenting. "I believe Robert killed my sister." Lana recounted the confession that Captain Dennis Davern had shared with her, how Wagner's anger had turned violent, how he had ordered the searchlights turned off, the Coast Guard left uncontacted, and silence imposed on everyone aboard. To Lana, these details were not merely suggestive, they were proof of intent. She emphasized what everyone else seemed to overlook. Natalie had always been terrified of water. She had nearly drowned as a child, and carried that trauma her entire life. No sane person with that fear would voluntarily step near a dinghy in the freezing dark waters of a November night, dressed in a thin nightgown. Hollywood called it a tragic accident, a loss of a shining star to the unforgiving sea. Lana Wood called it something else entirely: murder. Her voice, resolute and unwavering, cut through decades of whispered rumors and half-truths, insisting that the world not forget. For Lana, the tragedy was not just in losing a sister, it was in knowing that the circumstances of that night, the fear, the cries for help, and the chilling silence, had been ignored or actively suppressed. The sea had taken Natalie, but Lana demanded that those who remained answer for the void left behind. Robert Wagner lived the rest of his life under a shadow that never lifted, a shadow shaped by grief, speculation, and the unrelenting whispers of a world unwilling to forget. He avoided the press, shunned interviews, and even steered clear of the ocean itself, as though the very sight of the water might summon the night that had changed everything. And for decades, the name Natalie hung over him like a specter, one he could barely bear to speak aloud. When he finally broke his silence, decades after that fateful November night, his voice was low, trembling with the weight of years he could never reclaim. "Not a day goes by that I don't think of Natalie. I loved her with all my heart. Losing her was the darkest moment of my life." The words were simple, almost understated, but the depth of their sorrow could not be denied. Yet, in the cold eyes of the public, they were also open to question, was this the confession of a grieving husband, crushed by the loss of his wife? Or was it the words of a man quietly tormented by guilt, the memory of a moment he could neither explain nor erase? Even his daughter Natasha stepped into the impossible divide, defending her father with heartfelt conviction. Whatever happened that night, it wasn't murder, it was tragedy. But her words did little to quiet the persistent murmur of doubt. Over the years, the world remained painfully divided. To some, Wagner was a broken man, a victim of fate and circumstance, carrying the unbearable weight of loss. To others, he was a husband haunted by secrets he would never confess. A man whose charm and public persona had masked a darkness the world might never fully understand. Through it all, Wagner endured. He moved through the world quietly, finding small moments of peace and family, memories and the faint echoes of a love that had once been radiant. Friends described him as fragile, almost haunted, yet capable of glimpses of the warmth and gentleness that had first captured hearts decades before. Even in his later years, every photograph of Natalie Wood seemed to steal his breath. Every memory pulled him back into that cold, dark night on the waters off Catalina Island. And so he lived silent, sorrowful, burdened by the weight of a tragedy whose truth had eluded him, the public, and perhaps even history itself. In the end, it was neither innocence nor guilt that defined him, but the relentless shadow of a night that would haunt the rest of his life. When Robert Wagner passed away, Hollywood mourned, not just the man, but the mystery that followed him to the grave. The truth of that night, whether it was an accident, an argument gone too far, or something unspeakable, remains buried beneath the waves off Catalina Island. But one thing endures beyond doubt. It was not fame or scandal that defined them, but love, loss, and the unbearable silence of a mystery that never let go. Natalie Wood. Robert Wagner, a love story turned legend, a tragedy turned question mark. And beneath it all, the ocean, still whispering the same question after 40 years. What really happened aboard the Splendor that night?
That was today's story under the silent spotlight. If you enjoyed uncovering Hollywood's forgotten past, leave a like and subscribe for more vintage tragedies, mysteries, and untold legends. Until next time, keep the reel turning.